40 years after falling for a girl, he finally got to be with her. One early January day in 1999, 51 years old Georgine Martin, nee Huber, received a delivery of red roses. Her husband had recently passed away, so the flowers didn't seem completely out of the blue, but the name of the note that came with them did. The last place she had seen that name, Jerry Zimmerman, was in her high school yearbook from 1965. Dear Georgine, Jerry's card read, I was a classmate of yours, though I don't believe you knew who I was. I was painfully shy, and you were the prettiest girl I had ever seen. It was true that Georgine hardly remembered Jerry. Nearly 4 decades had passed since their paths first crossed in the hallways of Farnsworth Junior High School in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, where she still lived. Though I now live in DC, I keep close ties to Sheboygan. Jerry continued, I returned several times a year, and now to the crux of this letter, I will be visiting the weekend of May 15th, and I am wondering if we could meet for a coffee. I am, however, sensitive to the recent loss of your husband. If this approach comes too soon, I will understand and wait another 40 years. Why not, Georgine? Though to herself, as she put down the letter, she was certainly curious to see what Jerry looked like after so many years. If nothing else, it would be nice just to chat with him. She wrote back and agreed to meet with him that spring. In Washington, D.C., Jerry anxiously checked his mailbox each day. When Georgine's reply came, he was elated. She finally said yes. Georgine didn't know it, but she had broken Jerry's heart all those years ago. Jerry's interest in Georgine Huber began when he noticed her in the 9th grade. Her sparkling eyes gave him a euphoric jolt whenever they glanced, albeit fleetingly, at him. Jerry's shyness prevented him from saying a single word to her until their junior year in high school. A newly minted driver, Jerry was on his way to school one morning when she spotted Georgine walking with a friend. Before he could talk himself out of it, he pulled over and asked the girls whether they wanted a ride. They did. The friends climbed into the front seat with Georgine sitting next to Jerry. The beautiful girl he had been pining for was sitting just inches away, and it petrified him. Unable to think of anything to say to break the ice, Jerry didn't even introduce himself. Once at school, his passengers thanked him and went on their way. Jerry spent all the day mulling over his next move. His plan was simple. After school, he would drive around until he saw Georgine walking home. Then, just as he had done that morning, he would offer her a ride. She would accept, sit next to him again, and that would be that, he thought happily ever after. When the last bell rang, Jerry raced to the parking lot and started driving around the school. He soon found Georgine walking with the same girl from that morning. Jerry pulled over and rolled the window down. Fancy another ride? He asked. Georgine looked at him. No, we are going to walk. No, Jerry couldn't believe it in his mind. The three of them were already good friends. He slowly rolled the window back up and drove away, devastated. It only got worse. The following year, their senior year, he learned that Georgine was engaged. Jerry didn't dare approach her again. After high school, Jerry found work making deliveries for an electrical and plumbing wholesaler. He enjoyed the job until he was sidelined by a back injury in 1983. Jerry, then 36, was forced to do desk work, which he hated. A divorce and the death of his father added to his misery. Then one evening, Jerry opened up the Sheboygan Press and saw an ad for the University of Wisconsin. "Do you want to improve your life?" it asked. Intrigued, he read on. The ad advised a meeting with one of the college's counselors at the local library. By the end of his meeting, Jerry was signed up for 2 classes. He wasn't totally convinced more school would be help redirect his path, but he really enjoyed his coursework, and he eventually earned a degree in physical geography. Jerry soon left Wisconsin for Spokane, Washington, where he worked as a cartographer in the mapping department of the U.S. Geological Survey. He was later promoted to the U.S. Department of Defense's mapping agency in Washington, D.C. Moving to the nation's capital was a big adjustment. Jerry, who had been raised on a farm, was accustomed to seeing grazing animals and wide open spaces. In D.C., he found himself surrounded by politics and traffic. He missed Wisconsin. He called home every week, and he returned at least twice a year for his birthday in July and again at Christmas. Usually one of those times, he says, I'll drive by Georgine's house just to get a look. When he would see her out and about, he still could not work up the nerve to talk to her. Jerry would look in the local phone book for her name. It was always there besides her husband's. Jerry married and divorced a second time. Neither of his ex-wives ever knew of his everlasting affection of Georgine, though his friends back home did. On one of his semi-annual visits in December of 1998, Jerry caught up with his friend Frank Cooper. "Have you seen Georgine lately?" Frank asked. "No, not at all," Jerry replied. "Her husband died." Georgine's husband had succumbed to a brain tumor after being ill with it for nearly a year. All that time, Georgine had been his caretaker. Jerry had to go back to Washington, but before leaving town, he stopped at a local florist. While he didn't want to seem insensitive or to Georgine's husband's death, he didn't want to waste any more time. Leaving his shyness behind, he wrote a note to the "Send with the Roses" composition the letter way easy. The difficult part on that cold winter day was squeezing all his warm feelings for her onto one little card. For more cards, subscribe.